Today I'm turning AI slime real. Hit subscribe and let's get started. Okay, so the first one that I'm going to attempt to recreate is this AI honeycomb slime. Now, this looks so good, so I'm a little bit nervous of how I'm going to do this. The first thing I noticed is that it kind of crumbles when it's played with. So I'm just using some clear glue and a little bit of orange dye to make kind of a snow fizz base for this. This definitely is the wrong color, but it's going to be hidden in the slime anyway, so it doesn't really matter too much. And it's important that the slime stays sticky because I'm adding a ton of this plastic snow to it to give it that same kind of crumbly crunch effect. I actually had to go in with quite a bit of snow to get the kind of crunchy, crumbly texture I wanted. And honestly, I feel like this type of slime is so underrated because it is so satisfying to play with and makes the best ASMR. Now that was done, it was actually time to make this slime look like honeycomb. I found this honeycomb mold on Amazon, and I was really debating on how I was going to move forward with this, whether I was just going to use clay or I was going to do something else. But after a little bit of thinking, I decided to use some wax to make it look as realistic as possible. Because after all, honeycomb is literally made from beeswax anyway. I just poured my melted wax into the mold and let it sit. I definitely didn't leave this for long enough, and you'll see why. But this was my first attempt of it, and it actually didn't look too bad at all. Unfortunately, because I didn't let it set for long enough, it did become quite brittle, and it ended up breaking. But it really wasn't too big of a deal, and I was just going to see if I could incorporate it anyway, and I just made another one. I actually let this one sit and get hard for long enough, so this one was totally fine. But of course, these were definitely not the right color for honeycomb. So to fix this, I decided to use some acrylic paint, and then just carefully coat these in a thin layer of yellow. I can't lie, I thought this would be really easy to do, but it was actually really difficult to get in all of the grooves of the honeycomb. I had to thin the paint out a little bit and then just used a sponge brush over both of them. Once they were both fully covered with paint, I used a little bit of this iridescent spray just to make them look pretty, and then just left both of them to dry before I then moved on to the next step. We already made the crunchy inside, but we need something to actually hold that part of the slime. So for this, I'm going to use a block of Daiso clay and then just kind of push it into the same honeycomb mold so it's the same exact shape, and then press the non-damaged piece of honeycomb onto the top of this shaped clay piece. I ended up using a little bit of wax to stick this down, and then very carefully flipped it over and used a knife to kind of hollow out the middle of this. I had to be really careful not to also cut the wax, and then just scooped out the excess clay with my fingers. This definitely isn't going to look the same as the AI video, but I just wanted it to still have that satisfying crunch, and I really hope this is going to work. Unfortunately, the broken parts of honeycomb literally decided to break even more, so I had to make a new one, but I actually thought this would be a good way to seal this in. So while the wax was still hot and wasn't fully dried yet, I pressed this into it and completely sealed this in there. This is going to stop the slime from leaking, but now it actually kind of feels like a real piece of honeycomb. A honeycomb, of course, would not be complete without honey, so I'm just using some clear slime and a little bit more orange dye to create the honey part of the slime that I'm going to wrap around to cover the white edges of this honeycomb piece I made. I was a little bit skeptical of how this would look, but honestly, it really did start to come together once the honey was on. I added a cute little bee charm like the video had, then actually let the slime sit for a little bit so that the honey could kind of spread out and look a bit more natural. And I can't lie, I was really happy with how this turned out, and the ASMR was just so good. I think if I did this again, I would try and get some of the colors more accurate and maybe even try and dye the clay. But this was so satisfying to mix in, and I'm really happy that it still kind of had that crumbly effect like the video. Okay, this next one I have been waiting to attempt, and it is an AI slime keyboard. Now, I wasn't entirely sure how I was going to do this, but I knew I needed to make the keyboard to start with, and I bought this mold on Amazon that I thought would be absolutely perfect. I'm going to attempt this differently in another video, but for this one, I'm going to use wax to make all the individual pieces. So I just absolutely filled this mold with a ton of melted wax. I wanted these to be perfect, so when the wax had started to dry, I kind of scraped off the excess, just so they'd be easy to take out and they'd all have a flat back. The next part of this slime is going to be the actual slime part of this, and in the AI video it's a rainbow, so of course I'm going to attempt to do a rainbow too. Now, instead of dyeing the colors individually, I kind of want it to have a marbled effect, so I'm just dropping the dye straight into this clear slime and then just mixing it with a chopstick. While I was waiting for that to blend, it was time to check back on the keyboard, which had now fully set. I don't know why, I kind of thought it might be easier than it was, and I kind of thought that if I take it out gently, I can keep the positions of the keys and I won't have to rearrange all of them, but no, that's not how this went. And I basically had to pry each individual key out of the mold itself. They all turned out out great, but it just means that when I assemble this, it's going to take a little bit longer. Now that the rainbow slime had fully blended and was looking beautiful, it was time to now assemble this. Because all of the keys were separated, I basically just used the keyboard mold as like a guide to where I should put the keys in the slime, and then press them all downwards so that when I flip them out of the container, they'd all be the right way up. You can clearly see that I sped this up because this actually took a while. I was going to try and put all the letters in the right places, but it was taking way too long. And in the AI video, you basically can't see the letters anyway, so I don't think it matters too much. I even had some extra keys left, so I'm not sure I did this entirely right, but it still looks like a keyboard to me. Now here is where I kind of want to redo this and attempt it again, and actually just lay the slime over the keys on the table, because flipping this over was not as easy as I thought it would be, and it kind of messed up the position of the keys a little bit because it got stuck to the base of the container. So I was kind of scrambling and panicking, thinking that it didn't work out at all, but I basically just had to rearrange it while the keys were stuck in the slime. I'm actually really happy with how this turned out. It's definitely not the perfect keyboard, but I could definitely tell what it was, and I was excited to get into it. My favorite thing about this slime is honestly the rainbow colors. They're just so bright and vibrant, and they blended together so well. And I can't lie, poking the keys on this was so satisfying, and it did make some really good ASMR. I think the wax doesn't really give it that jelly-like look like the AI video had, but I still think it turned out pretty good. And it was actually really satisfying to play with. I really love mixing the colors together as well, and it actually turned to this really pretty purple shade. And the keys actually gave it a really unique texture. It was kind of like a jelly cube slime that just wasn't squishy. Okay, so the next AI slime we have is this one, which I think is meant to be like treasure. I'm honestly not really sure, but it kind of looks like a sand slime with bits of wood on and gems on top. To start with, I'm going to make the sand slime as the base, so I'm going to need to make a really sticky clear slime. And it's important that it stays sticky so we can add a ton of sand to this and make it really, really crunchy. I've said this before, but I really do think sand slime is such an underrated texture. And even mixing it into the base of the slime is so satisfying just because it gives such like crunchy ASMR. I ended up going in with even more sand just because I wanted to make this super crunchy, and the base of this needs to be quite big because that's the main part of the slime. I was honestly a little bit worried that I'd added too much sand because it was kind of acting a bit like a cloud slime, but once it was all fully combined, the texture was perfect, and I then assembled it into the container as the base of the slime. The next thing we need to make is the wooden planks on the slime, at least I think that's what it is. So to do this, I'm just pressing down some Daiso clay and then cutting off the edges to make rectangular pieces. Once that was done, I needed these to have a bit of texture, so I used the knife to scratch in some wood grain onto these to make them look as textured and as realistic as possible. To give them the brown color of the wood, I decided just to paint on some pigment onto these, and they actually didn't look too bad. But instead of using all four, I just chose the two that looked the most realistic and then kind of pressed them diagonally onto the slime before it was time for the next step, which is the rainbow gems. Before I add these, I'm adding some LED lights because I really want these to glow when the gems are put over it. And honestly, I think I may have gone a little bit overboard because this has way more gems than the video does. And once all of the gems were added, it was definitely giving full-on treasure chest. Again, I'm still not entirely sure what this is meant to be, but I actually think it looks really cool, and I was so excited to mix it. I was actually so obsessed with how this turned out, and I actually think it looks a little bit better than the AI video, even though I'm not entirely sure what it's meant to be. But it is definitely very crunchy. Well, I had so much fun turning these AI slimes into real ones. I'm actually really happy with how all of these turned out, and I'm excited to hear what you guys think. If you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, and if you want to see more videos like this in the future, make sure to hit subscribe. Until then, I'll see you guys in the next one.